to grasp the actual nature of your being is to become able to overcome all of your troubles, or at least take the sting out of all this suffering that humanity normally experiences, that you, everyone might normally experience if we're not really aware of who we are, of what we really are. Because if we only consider ourselves, again, physically speaking, there's a lot of suffering out there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can happen to your physical body, and if it does occur, well, it makes you suffer and it makes you feel bad. But then if you understand actually that you are a spiritual being, then you can take that sting out of the suffering of the physical side of your life, and you no longer suffer in the same way. In fact, some people have reached a stage where physical pain becomes completely non-existent for them, or at least to such a degree that they are not responding in the same manner as most people. Now, how could that be? Well, they already have an awareness of being something greater, or at least different than just their body. So the signal of pain in that case is overwritten by some part of themselves, some spiritual part. Now, this is absolutely fascinating. And perhaps one day you will reach a stage like that yourself, who knows? But perhaps that's not really your goal. It doesn't really matter. It's just interesting to consider that this is possible. Now, for this video, I wanted to ask the question, what happened to Eve? Now, Eve in the Bible in Genesis is described as the mother of all the living. So what happened to her? Because if you look in the Bible, you will see there's mention that supposedly Adam died at some point. But Eve, there's no mention of it. She is mentioned as having given birth to 2 times in a row, and then she vanished from the picture entirely. She's mentioned only in a few other verses in totally different parts of the Bible, but overall she has mysteriously vanished without a clear indication of what happened. But yet Eve is the mother of all the living, so it must be hiding something that is with us even to this day, since we are part of the living. Now, Adam and Eve fell into physicality. It's talking about you and me. It is written eventually Adam passed away. Eve is the soul, and you are a soul. Eve is trapped in physicality and needs her husband Adam, which is the power of the mind, to be broken free from the prison of the flesh, of the earthly domain. That is our duty. Whether we are ready for this or not is another question to consider, since most people, honestly, they're not ready for any of this. They rather not even listen to it, because perhaps part of them, if they do believe in it, well, it suddenly also becomes uncomfortable, because again, this all actually leads into what sounds morbid in a way, that the ego would have to pass away. But if you understand what your ego is, then it would make total sense, because the ego is again part of that mask, of part of the flesh, part of this physical being that we are, and that people are calling us, that we know ourselves to be, but we used to actually believe it, and most people still believe it, but then the belief starts to break apart, and you realize you're something much greater than just your ego. So in all of us, Adam sleeps, which is our mind. It lies dormant, is not active, for if it was, we would start to seek and know the kingdom of God soon enough. Now, Eve was taken from Adam's rib. This is symbolism for mind vibrating in such a way, causing awareness of the soul, of the spiritual self within us. That is why Eve came out of Adam. Our minds simply are made aware of a deeper spiritual part to ourselves, which is what we call soul. But in the end, you will find your soul existed before your body did. But that is from a time long since forgotten. And salvation is about remembrance, for once you start perceiving through intuition and vision the true destiny of your soul, you will no longer be tied to this world in the way you were before you became aware of this. Before this awareness sets in, you believe yourself to be a certain man or woman, of a certain age and race, and on it goes. So again, if Adam passed away, it actually means that for all of us he is asleep as our consciousness, unaware of his spiritual essence, which is his wife. Now, Adam and Eve needed to become one. That means that your mind, your ability right now to think and to imagine and to reason about divine things, has to lead into unity with your own soul essence. And that is absolutely beautiful, but that's also part of this divine heavenly marriage. Physical marriage has nothing to do with this, because you can, try to marry a nice man or woman, but this is not going to make you aware of your own soul. Now, the love that humans experience between each other at that time can, in a way, give them some taste and idea of true love. But the actual love of God lies way beyond human relationships itself. And once you have experienced that love, you can no longer settle for these lower levels of human love. They're absolutely fickle. They're not really stable at all. We know this, and therefore it's better to seek the love of God itself. And most people have no clue what God is, so they can't find it. And they have to go through this journey until they realize where to look. Something inside of them starts to stir. I have had enough of all this suffering. I want to find my way back to God. Or if they don't call it God, they just feel, I want to find my way out of this mess, of all this drama and suffering. And then intuitively they are all being guided towards ultimately what we call God. So it was also stated in Genesis that God put Adam into a deep sleep. Now this is interesting to note. It never stated he ever awoke from this dream. Now if you look at Genesis, you can see this. He was put into sleep, but never did it actually say that Adam awoke as well. It's like it just kept going. Now our minds are put into the same kind of state of sleep. Hence why throughout all the Bible you read lines pleading for the Lord in the individual, which is your I amness, to awaken your pure spiritual awareness, has to awaken again, to wake up from this dream of separation from God. Because right now the awareness is so strongly tied to physicality that it is not aware of its own nature. It's only aware of what it perceives through the physical senses. But that is just the outside world. We want to understand the inner spiritual world of consciousness. Now the state of sleep represents a state of ignorance, of not being aware of something clearly. So part of the awakening is again becoming aware of your true spiritual nature, that is part of the great creative power behind the universe, which again is described as God. You see, all these things, you will understand them once you actually truly desire to know them. Yeah, I've had people throughout my life always regularly tell me, well, it sounds beautiful, this love of God that you talk about is so strong. I wish I could experience it. People have said this time and time again, but they so far still haven't experienced it. Why? Well, honestly, it's because I realized for myself, perhaps really this calling first needs to come from the depths of your being before it will ever truly occur. What do we mean by calling? It's this real pull from the depths of your being. You can't really explain it. I can't. But it just became so strong that I had to seek the truth, the eternal truth about life, that I can no longer look to the lower levels of life alone, where death and suffering exists, etc. So we want to go beyond all of that, and when we do that, that's when we evolve and open up the consciousness in such a direction that we become aware of these truths that existed all along, but were sort of hidden from view because of our focus on physicality alone. So I wanted to share a verse from Hebrews chapter 3 that is also very useful to remember for you on this journey, and that is to take heed, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief, in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we are made partakers of Christ, if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. So it's basically saying that every day this should become part of your life, to consider the spiritual truths of yourself and of God and the universe, to really seek it and to do it on a daily basis. And if you are doing this together with others, to remember and remind them to do it daily as well, because otherwise you end up potentially being hardened through the deceitfulness of sin, which means what ends up happening for all of us and what we have to be redeemed from is this attitude of considering the physical part of life the only reality. And because there's so much conflict in this physical side of life, we also accept all that conflict as the only reality, and then we partake in that same conflict. We also get ourselves into conflict with other people and things, and therefore we're all sinning. And that's the deceitfulness of this world. But by reminding yourself and perhaps others, if they are willing and interested, you can at least for yourself make sure that from now on you're going to stop sinning. You're going to stop going along with the chaos of this world. You're going to actually learn more about your true soul, your true nature, so that you yourself can at least find peace and happiness and true joy from the depths of your soul. And it's no longer dependent on physicality, because for most people it is. And they always risk losing it. If your joy and happiness depends on things physically, you risk losing it. Now, it also stated we are made partakers of Christ. So you, I, everyone is already, for the sheer reason that you're a human being, man or woman, it doesn't matter, you're already made a candidate to actually partake of Christ consciousness. But you see, you can clearly grasp Christ consciousness has to be something totally different than human normal consciousness. You see, Christ consciousness is that power throughout the universe that allows you to then intuitively perceive through vision and insight, to perceive the greater picture, the true unity behind creation, the true nature of unity that exists throughout the universe. But this can only happen, again, as I said, if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast until the end. So you should never be dismayed. You should never let your mind be dissuaded away from this, to be distracted, to be put down by other people, their doubts, or even your own, mostly your own, but sometimes other people also doubt in us, and then we might start doubting it. Don't do any of that, just ignore it. And you see, you can only ignore it if you truly understand the bigger picture of life, because then none of it makes any sense. People still comment on my channel and they say kind of nonsense to me. I mean, personally, I think it's really stupid at times. They're pretty upset and they don't believe what I'm speaking, or they say that it is of the devil, this and that, and I just read it and I'm like, okay, you can think that, go right ahead. It doesn't matter, because I'm gonna keep going doing what I'm doing, man, and you can't stop me. You might say, well, if I end your life I stopped you. No, you didn't. You only stopped me physically speaking with this one body I currently use, but you never are able to stop my soul from going in this direction and then speaking about it to all of creation, because that will happen to anyone who will go this road. So if you're ready to discover the true nature of yourself, you're going to find Eve, because Eve is your soul. That is Eve, the symbolism of Eve. So that is why, interestingly enough, they never mentioned that she necessarily died. But Adam they did, but dying in that sense means becoming unaware. I mean, losing awareness, that's death and ignorance in a way. Sleep and death are considered ignorance in the Bible, a certain ignorance. Now, death can never exist for Eve, because that would mean if the soul were to be able to die, to pass away, if we describe it like that, and it would mean that there would be no life, but life is always here. You can't exist without life, but your life takes on many forms. You can simply be in mind only ignorance of this eternal life that already exists within you, which is part of Eve. Now, I hope you will find your Eve, because the more you break free from the limitations of the flesh, of these beliefs and perceptions that you've held so dear for so long, the more you realize they're all a delusion and that they're not showing you the real picture of who you are, well, the quicker you'll find your true nature, and that is when joy will come upon you. That is when you become realizing that this is all such great, majestic and useful information, and not my video in particular, but I mean what is in the Bible and other ancient texts. They contain real wisdom, but they're just like hidden in plain sight. They're written in such a way that most people don't really notice it, because it takes intuition and spiritual perception to look at them to really grasp what they're revealing. And hopefully one day that will happen to you as well. Now, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to receive inspirational videos on a regular basis. And with that being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.